All right, this is Patrick Rogers, and today we have the privilege to have Scott Humphrey on the show. And Scott is the president and CEO of the World Floor Covering Association. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks. Good to be here, Patrick. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Love to have you, and can't wait to dig in. So a little bit about Scott. Scott has over 40 years of experience in all facets of the floor covering industry, from sales and sales management of Shaw to all the way to working up the corporate ladder to director of the entire Shaw flooring network. Scott's organization now exists to ensure the success and profitability of the professional floor covering dealer and to represent their common interests. Scott's been doing this for over 10 years now. And he's an advocate for change and passionate about servant leadership. I know there's going to be so many great things we're going to go into in the into the show today. Before we get to that, Scott, and your journey and just what makes you amazing at what you're doing, what's one interesting fact that not many people know about you?
Yeah, so Patrick, I am a vocal performance church music major. I actually pursued going into ministry for a period of time after. So when you talk about servant leadership, that's really a passion of mine. But yeah, I do recordings every year at Christmas that I send out to my members and to my board of directors, some secular, some faith-based, and really have a great time doing that. It's one way I get to use it anymore.
That's cool, man. So you actually not write, but you record some songs.
Yeah.
And you send it out to your network.
Yeah, I do some writing, but I go to a recording studio and usually record about 3 to 5 songs a year and send them out.
Awesome. Yeah. So you're actually doing some originals as well?
Yeah, I do some originals. I've written since I was 8 years old. Just always had a passion for music and singing. I've got a son who's now just recorded his demo in Nashville and is pursuing country music and Christian music. So yeah, it's still in the family.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. I can relate because my father was actually a country singer, and he still is. And I play guitar and sing, and it's awesome. So, I mean, I'm not good or anything, and my dad's amazing. He should have been pro or whatever, but it's just so relaxing. It's such it's almost like a meditation when playing guitar and singing.
Yeah, and I wish I played enough piano to write. I had to minor in piano as a vocal performance major, but I'm telling my son's taking up guitar now, and it really makes a difference. I always had that vision, sitting around the campfire and being able to play while everybody sang. So my son hopefully is taking that passion and running with it.
He's got that covered. Cool. Awesome, Scott. So tell us about the World Floor Covering Association.
Yeah, so we are the largest association in the flooring industry. We really kind of exploded during COVID. We had about 1,200 members on January 1st of 2020. We now have around 12,000 members. And so
10X in like 2.5 years.
Yeah, and part of the reason for that obviously was the perfect storm. I mean, we do some heavy lobbying in Washington, D.C., and so we were very involved in the PPP loans and getting what was put into the PPP loans put in, and so we can speak for our members. And so a lot of members joined us at that point. We had a lot of groups within the industry that have 1,000 to 5,000 members that joined in full and had all their members become members, so that when we went to DC, our voice would be heard differently. Yeah, because of the number of people we represented.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Awesome.
Our primary focus, Patrick, I don't think I answered that question well, but our primary focus is to look at independent flooring retailer and provide what they need for success. We have the goals of simplifying their life, providing leadership training for them so that they can be better at what they do, and obviously any other training they need from a financial standpoint, better understanding product. We have 2 different associations under ours. We bought the floor covering B2B and brought that under our umbrella. We also bought a professional installation certification company called CFI, Certified Flooring Installers International, and they are both part of the WSCA as well.
Okay, wow. So you kind of have this full suite of offering. It's not just an association. You have leadership development, business development. You have these other resources that really are kind of helping them be more successful. That's
correct. That's the whole goal of, you'll hear me say this, but I think leadership has to impact the person. It can't impact the profession only. And so we look at ways that we can impact leaders, knowing that will trickle down and impact everyone else down the chain.
Gotcha. So walk us through a little bit of your journey in getting the World Covering Association to be where it's today, and your past, if you like.
Yeah. So I'll take you back. My dad owned a carpet mill. My dad was with the Corps of Engineers first. We moved to North Georgia so he could help build a dam. He's a geologist. And while we were in North Georgia, the carpet industry exploded. About 70% of all the carpet in the world is made in or around a 30-mile radius of Dalton, Georgia.
I did not know that.
At that time, Patrick, there were more millionaires in Dalton, Georgia per capita than anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And so my dad took his money out of retirement with the Corps, started his own carpet mill, never made money. It took me great work ethic. I began working in the mill when I was 7 years old. Two older brothers, one who was 9 at the time, one that was 11. And we all worked in the mill, and that's how we survived. We didn't make it well. And I remember my dad asking me one day if I was going to go into the industry when I got older. And I said, oh no, there's no way. And so lesson number one is never say never. But I came back to it because it's what I knew. And the people who had impacted my life were people in the industry who had invested in my father's business and invested in me growing up. And so it gave me an opportunity to give back. Yeah. So then from there, I went to Shaw. When I decided that I was not called into ministry, and I don't know if people understand that, but I did ministry because the guy that had impacted my life the most was a youth minister, and I wanted to do what he did, but it wasn't a calling in my life. And so I was kind of miserable as I did it. Like I should do it anyway. And so I sought out another profession, and have done more in ministry probably because of that move than anything else, because I was able to work at churches that couldn't afford to pay me. And so in our community here, probably 7 different churches, I've either served as a minister of music or youth. But when I left the ministry on a full-time basis, I went to Shaw Industries, who was the largest building in Dalton at the time, and asked them how to get a job. Ended up getting a sales job, moved to Hagerstown, Maryland, was there for 2 years, covering part of Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and around the DC area. And came back and headed up recruiting for Shaw, hired all the salespeople for a period of 7 years, interviewed almost 10,000 people during that time frame, and we hired over 1,000. So there's sales force today. I still go to shows and I'll see people that I hired years ago. From there, I moved into training, and from there into leadership development. And then, as you read in my bio, at the end, I had the privilege of managing the Shaw Flooring Network, which is a group of about 2,000 of the select retailers in the nation who had partnered with Shaw. And then I was, so I turned 60 in about 10 days. And so when I got the call, I was about to turn 50. And I made a list. I'm a list person. And I made a list of 10 things I wanted to accomplish in my career before I retired. And I get this call one day, and it says, hey, we're looking for someone to be the CEO of the WFCA, the World Floor Covering Association. I said, well, listen, I don't know of anybody, but I'll keep my ear to the ground. And they said, no, we were thinking about you. And I just remember laughing, because I was in the job that I thought I wanted the rest of my life. I was very comfortable. I was, we had a convention every 2 years down in Orlando, Florida. We rented out Universal Studios just for our team at night, and they could go and ride. I mean, it was phenomenal. And I said, I'm not really interested. And they said, well, could you just look at the job description? And really, to get them off the phone, I said, yes. And
all right, fine.
I got the job description. 9 of the 10 things that I'd written on my list that I wanted to accomplish were on the front page. And I said, okay. I said, God, I don't know what you're up to, but I'll be faithful. I'll follow. Maybe you just want to humble me, because I've obviously never been a CEO, so they're not going to hire me. But after a pretty lengthy process, they did, and it's been a good ride. We've made a lot of changes here. We've had a lot of impact. We've got a lot more to come.
Yeah, congratulations, man. I love when the universe just speaks to you. I mean, that is a great story, Scott. 9 out of the 10 things on your list.
It's pretty obvious.
Matched exactly with the job description. It's like, okay, all right, I'm going for it. I'll do it. I'm with you. I love stories like that, man. And especially when they work out. Especially when they work out. Yeah.
That's the confirmation, right? You go for it. Yeah. It has to work out, or you don't know what voice you're listening to.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit about what are the things you think that what did they see in you? What are the things that's made you so successful in this position?
I think the primary thing they saw in me was the relationships I had throughout the industry. I'm a very relational person. I really believe in investing in people, and so my goal was always not to have a lot of acquaintances, but to have a lot of friends, to know people in depth, to be able to call on them, and certainly to encourage them to call on me. And I would often sign off on my messages by saying, if I can do anything for you personally or professionally, please reach out to me. And so that's certainly been one of the things that's helped the WFCA the most, is we've been able to tap into those relationships, especially as we swelled from 1,200 to 12,000. A lot of that was because of the relationships, and more importantly, understanding that value. I hired people that had that same trait. And so I've often said that you don't have to be the smartest in the room. You just have to surround yourself with people who are, but that are loyal to you.
Yeah.
And so if you can create loyalty and you can bring people in that are much smarter than you in given areas, that's how you holistically bring this organization together to meet the needs of your members. And that's what we've really sought to do.
I love that, man. In fact, I had somebody on the show yesterday, and a theme that constantly shows up around there's a number of themes, but one of the themes that shows up is, if you ever read the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, but it's exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah. Listen, it's all about the people. I mean, ultimately, when you look back on your life, you're not going to remember simply the things you did.
No,
you'll remember the people that you impacted. But more importantly, the only thing that will outlive you is the people that you impacted. That's your legacy. And so I'm, about to turn 60. And so I start thinking, okay, legacy is very important to me. How can I impact people in a way that it makes them better leaders so that they can keep that trail going for years and years and years?
Yeah. I love that. Especially the takeaway of the relationships in the industry, but being cognizant about that, because it's really easy as a CEO to be stuck inside your company and just be focusing on this instead of making those partnerships and relationships early on.
It really is, Patrick. And you have to be really careful, because we can get so busy doing the stuff that we forget who we're doing the stuff for. And I'm telling you, balance in life is one of the biggest challenges, and always will be for a leader, because when people realize you can lead, they'll call on you. And it's such a compliment. They're calling on you because they need something done and they believe you can help them get it done. But sometimes the right answer is no. Sometimes the right answer is, I'm not the right person. And maybe you refer them to somebody who is. That ego part of us wants to be there to help people no matter what. We've got to be willing to put that on the back shelf and say, okay, yeah, but I may be a solution for this person, but am I the best solution for them? And that's a difficult thing sometimes.
So what do you mean by that? So when people come to you with a question or needing help, you could solve it for them. But it sounds like you take a different approach. You kind of do you put it back on them, or do you say there's other ways they could go?
Yeah, but both, Patrick. So first of all, I definitely put it back on them.
Nice.
I don't like upward delegation. And people naturally will look to delegate up because they know the person who is above them has proven the ability to get things done. And so don't be surprised when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got this problem. Well, yeah, you do have it, and it's your problem, and you're going to have that problem when you walk out. Now, I might help you come up with some solutions, but ultimately you're going to be the one that implements those solutions to solve the problem. Now, part of what I offer to them may simply be, that's an issue. What do you think you ought to do about it? Based on your experience, how have you handled situations like this in the past? Who do you think might be available and have the expertise to help you solve this? And then sometimes they'll walk out with the name of somebody else. Sometimes they'll walk out shaking their head going, I don't know, but at least they have the question in mind now that they have to answer. And sometimes I will say, listen, I can't be the solution, but I can be part of it. And so if you form a team that needs to get this done and you see a role for me, then I'm happy to step in.
Yeah. And I love what you said too about the ego, because it literally gives us dopamine
It does.
right?
It
To
does.
solve
Yeah.
a problem, a person's problem, right? So
Yeah.
it's almost like we're addicted to helping them, but we're not helping them. We're hurting them.
Yeah. And not
And
only that, Patrick,
yeah,
sometimes you're hurting yourself.
absolutely.
I mean, that
Absolutely.
desire to solve everybody's problem is what allows you to miss your child's basketball game. You know, because
There it is.
oftentimes we would much rather get the thrill of being part of somebody's success than simply sitting in the stands as a spectator. And
Yeah.
those are both vital and important. I mean, I've got triplet daughters. I have a son who's 4 years older. My daughters all played basketball. My son played every sport you could play. And I
Yeah.
tried to be at all those games, and yet I traveled a lot. And yet my goal was to let them know that I was invested in their success and everything that they were involved in.
Oh man. Yeah, I love that. And in fact, one of the I learned this from somebody I looked up to. I forget who it was, but his rule was if you come to me with a problem, you better have two of your top solutions with you. You don't even talk to me unless you got two potential solutions and you've thought it through.
I've not used that, but I love it. I think
Right.
that's great
That's a good
advice.
one. Yeah, that's a good one. So cool, man. So what do you think else? What are some of the other things that have led to you to be so successful, man?
I'm very driven. I mean, I realized when I was young that we were poor. We lived in a 10-foot wide trailer behind the post office in the community in Chatsworth, Georgia. Dad couldn't pull a paycheck. He took all of his money out of retirement and started the mill, but it wasn't making any money. He got in when everybody else was getting out. My mom made $1.50 an hour as working at a pharmacy, and that's what we lived off of. We qualified for everything the government could give, but we wouldn't take it. Mom and dad would never allow us to get free lunch or anything. And so we worked, and I worked every day after school. I went to the mill and I worked in the mill. And then on the weekends, I would mow grass around the community. So I'd have some extra money and do whatever.
You're like a teenager at this point, 13, 14 or something?
No, that started when I was 7, 8 years old. I mean, we did. And when I went to college at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, I worked on the landscaping crew. Hard work never embarrassed me.
Yeah.
I wasn't embarrassed that everybody else at the school, had their school paid for it. And I get this thrill, that dopamine rush from doing anything where I can see at the end of it, I accomplished something. So I love mowing grass, man. It doesn't matter. Anything I can do, I can look back and go, that looks different, because often as leaders, we can work for months and never see that anything has budged.
Absolutely.
And we need that. We need that sense of completion.
Totally. That's why, businesses that only have annual goals and don't break it down to quarterly and then break it down to monthly and break it down to weekly and daily, they don't ever, they lose out on those little dopamine rushes as they go, right?
You do. It's funny. I have a meeting this afternoon, a Zoom call with our members from around the country, on a program we call GROW, which stands for Growing Retail in Our World. But I do not grow on leadership. And one of the things I'm talking about is how important it is that you have something you can measure.
Yeah.
Measurability is so vital, because leaders are goal oriented. It's about accomplishing the next thing. And that's personally and professionally. So I turned 60, as I've told you multiple times. I can't believe I've said that often, because it's still registering in my head.
This is a big thing for you. It's hitting you hard, man.
It's big, man. The zeros and the fives always got me.
You look good, man. You look good.
So when I turn 60 on that day, I will do 600 push-ups. I will run 6 miles, and I will do 60 pull-ups. That's so far. I mean, that's a goal I set for myself, because it gives me a reason to train now.
Nice.
A lot of leaders are so focused on the goal that they forget they have to start now, and there's no motivation to get there. I'm doing a Spartan race in 2 days.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Yeah, because when I turned 40, I did a triathlon just to prove I could. And so now at 60, I want to show that I can still do this. I'm focused on living every moment of life I have left. I don't simply want to exist. I care nothing about the corner office. My last name's not going to get me anywhere. And I don't simply want to manage. I want to lead. And I can't lead others if I don't lead myself.
Yeah.
You have to lead in your own life before you earn the right to lead other people. And so that measurability is vital.
Yeah. And in everything in life too. It sounds like, I can relate, because 10 years ago, I was super out of shape. And I was like, I just can't get the motivation to do this. And my boss, actually, who's an avid runner. He's like, what really helps me is, I signed up for something 6 months down the road.
Exactly.
So therefore I'm committed now. And now I have to figure out a way to make it happen.
Exactly. And that's what I did. But Patrick, I added one thing to that. I had two gentlemen here at work that I challenged to go through it with me. And so in addition to simply having signed up, I created the accountability that when they saw me eating the wrong foods or drinking Coke instead of drinking, they would say, well, hang on, weren't you training for that event? And I needed that accountability to really keep me focused. Vital for leaders. You've got to let some people be around you who are willing to ask you and able to ask you the tough questions in your personal and your professional life. Did you handle that situation correctly? Have you made appropriate time to spend with each of your children? Those questions are so vital.
Yeah, that's some. You read Stephen Covey much? First things first.
Yeah,
I mean, you're spitting right from that book. Amazing, life changer for me personally, and exactly what you're talking about. Like, you got to have that balance, or else if you let your balance at home go, relationship with your kids, and that falls apart, that's going to affect your health, your stress. That's going to affect your work. A lot of people don't, especially the younger generation. We're all, spitting fire and gung ho, and it takes a while for those things to mound up. But I got divorced after 13 years. Why? Well, I was Mr. Corporate America, gone all the time, and I didn't know these things back then, right?
Yeah, and Patrick, I'm going through that process now. I think the other thing I would say is that failure is part of success in leadership. So the key is not to repeat the failure. The key is to be very honest with yourself about what caused the failure and make sure you don't go there again. And I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but one of the things you notice leaders do is they don't identify themselves with a mistake. They use that as a springboard. So they learn from it, but their focus is on what can I change next? How can I be better in every area of my life? How can I challenge and inspire others? I hate the word motivation because I don't think you can motivate other people. I think they have to motivate themselves, but I think you can, as a leader, create an environment where motivation is more likely to occur. And that's my goal as a leader with my staff here, is to create an environment where they feel comfortable taking risk, where they feel comfortable with the potential that they might fail. But if they fail, they know a couple of things. They know I trusted them first. And secondly, they know they're going to be stronger after the failure than they were when they went into it. And that's important, especially at a time where if you lose somebody as an employee, replacing them is so much more difficult and so much more costly. I want them to know failure is an investment from me. If you fail, I'm not getting rid of you. I've invested in you. I'm giving you the freedom. And by the way, when you give that freedom, the likelihood of somebody leaving you goes down dramatically because you've invested in them as a person, not as a paycheck. And that's vitally different.
Yeah. I love the way that you're looking at it, because it's a total reframe. It's a total reframe. And what you said there, failure is an investment. And they do that. You're investing in the person, and they're going to have to grow. They're going to grow. And to grow, we have to fail. We have to have learning opportunities. We have to make mistakes.
Well, Zig Ziglar, at the same time I was reading Covey, I was reading Zig, and Zig had a statement I've never forgotten. He said, failure is not a person, it's an event. And so often the people that could be leaders that aren't have gotten stuck in the failure and identified themselves as that.
With that failure. It's not them. It was just
it's not you. It was a moment in time where things did not align. And maybe you weren't qualified to be in the position in the first place, but you don't have to live there. I mean, one of the things, if you ever hear my podcast, one of the things you'll hear me say over and over, Patrick, is the past is a great place to learn. It's a terrible place to live. And we all know people that are still in high school, even though they're 40 years old, living some glory moment that they had, or stuck in some failure that they had. Man, the past is a great place to look back to and see where you were, but you can't live back there. You've got to live going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. People kind of hold on to their past and those failures, and they kind of allow it to become their identity. Instead of being present and looking forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately that is a choice. I mean, remember,
It's
people
absolutely a choice.
they can tell you you're a failure, but you have to believe it for it to hold you back.
Mhm. Love it. Yeah. Now, in our pre-call, you were talking, you had a story about a picture that was over your couch growing up.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of the reason that I believed everything was possible was because I was kin at the time to the Vice President of the United States, Hubert Humphrey.
Mm.
And so, though we had a Naugahyde couch and a 10-foot wide trailer, over that
Uh-huh.
Naugahyde couch was a picture of the Vice President of the United States wishing best of luck to my dad.
That's awesome.
And I grew up thinking, you know what? If he can do it, I can. You know, it's
Yeah.
and I believe. Listen, I remember I've had the privilege of interviewing Warren Buffett 3 or 4 times, where I sat down one-on-one with him in my previous job because he acquired Shaw Industries when I was there.
Oh, okay.
And they
Wow.
sent me to interview him, and yeah, one time on stage, and then a couple of times I flew to him, and he used to talk about winning the birth lottery. It bothered me a little bit
Birth
because I didn't
lottery.
really understand it, but he said, man, when you were born in the United States,
Mm.
almost every excuse you could use to hold you back no longer exists,
Wow.
because you have
Yeah.
potential that nobody else outside of this country will fully have. And he's right. We have no reason
Yeah.
to believe that something is impossible for us. And listen, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I grew up very poor,
Right.
but I believed that potential was out there for me not to stay that way. And I know we have people from all walks of life that may see this and they go, yeah, but you didn't have to deal with what I did. You're right, I didn't. But you did. And it
Yeah.
happened in the past. And now you have the potential to move forward and not let that become your identity. It was
Right.
a moment in time. It was a challenge for you. But the truth is, you're probably stronger because you went through it than I am. You're stronger in some area because your challenge was different than the challenge that molded me. So use that challenge to spur you forward, not to hold you
Mm.
back.
Man, I love that. It's very cool that you got to interview him a number of times, number one, and meet him. I'm sure that just that itself was life-changing for you.
It was so funny, Patrick. If I can tell a quick story. So the
Yeah,
first time we
please.
went to see him, President Obama had been elected but had not been sworn in.
Right.
And so I get to Warren Buffett's office, and he's about 45 minutes late for our meeting. And when he comes in, he's so apologetic. Guys, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting. I said, well, no, Mr. Buffett, you're Mr. Buffett. And
So he's humble. That's good to
yeah,
know.
I
Cool.
said, I
Consider it.
said, listen, we're on your time. You
Yeah.
do what you want to. He said,
Yeah.
well, Mr. Obama called, and I felt like I needed to take the call. And I said, yeah, I think I would have taken that call too. And I said, hey, listen, the cameras aren't running. Let me ask you a question. I said, if he asked you to serve on his cabinet, would you consider that? And because there was talk that he might be a minister of finance or something.
Financial advisor or something.
And he said, oh no, he said, I know where he's at if I need him.
Ah!
Yeah, he was going to be helping Obama. Obama was going to be helping him. So
That was a total reframe turnaround there.
he was a super nice guy. It was like sitting down and talking to your grandfather, and very passionate about what he does. Very simple, and I think part of the reason for his success is he doesn't complicate life. He said he and Bill Gates used to go into master classes, and they would say, hey, who do you think uses their computer more?
Yeah.
And they would all say Bill Gates. And he'd say, oh, no. He said, because I play bridge. And he said, I'm on my computer more than Bill Gates is.
That's funny.
He never used it for any stock advice or anything. He still used the hardcover papers, but
Yeah.
but he loved to be on there just to play bridge. That's the only reason he used it.
Man, that's so awesome. Very cool. Yeah. So Scott, if you were going to have a CEO, someone come in and take the reins for you as CEO of World Covering Flooring Association, what book would you require that they read before taking the reins?
So Patrick, I was never much of a reader growing up, and I'm passionate about it now. I read, I use Audible, I use Blinkist, I mean, anything I can.
Yep. I'm with you.
One book that's really stood out to me, and I've shared it with many people, is called It's Your Ship by Captain Michael Abrashoff. And it's a phenomenal read. It's a phenomenal book because it's not leadership in theory, it's leadership in practicality.
Absolutely.
He talked about how he took the worst ship in the Navy. It had the worst retention rate in the Navy, and in 1 year had the highest retention rate in the Navy. And they tested out its skills, everything better than any other ship. How can one leader make that much difference in 1 year? And part of it was because he was willing to push up against the boundaries that the Navy allowed. He did not assume a no.
Right.
So one of the first things, if you walked onto his ship and you were just placed onto the ship, you had 30 minutes to spend in the captain's quarters. Now, normally, if you were in the captain's quarters, that was not a good thing. You didn't want to go there. But
no, it's not good.
He would have you come in, and the first thing you did is say, call your parents, let them know that you're here, let them know you're okay. And he would send cards to the parents on birthdays and give updates on how the sailors were doing. Well, now you don't have the pressure you're putting on the sailor to re-enlist, but guess who else is encouraging that sailor to re-enlist? Mom and dad, spouse, everyone. I mean, he just had a different philosophy. He treated his sailors as people, and he invested in them as people. And listen, I'm telling you, when you invest in people, it's hard for people to leave people. It's easy for people to leave a paycheck for a higher paycheck. But the more you're invested in their life, the more difficult it is for them to go. And the longer you can keep people around and count on their stability and their knowledge and their wisdom, the better the ship runs, no matter what the ship is, right? It's an amazing book. He's got a second book called Get Your Ship Together.
Right.
Phenomenal speaker, phenomenal gentleman. Again, very humble. I had the chance to work under some amazing Department of Defense experts, and gives a lot of the credit to the people and not to himself, which I always love in leaders.
As someone who came from, as an officer in the Navy, someone who was in that place and was an officer that worked under, captains, of course, I can absolutely respect what he's done. And I obviously I've read the book as well, because when we're in that environment, there is no course, there is no instruction that tells you, in the Navy specifically. I mean, maybe things have changed now. It's been 20 years since I've been in, but there was nobody saying that you should do this. There was no best practices on how to create this people-centric organization. I mean, I had an amazing captain at the time, but he definitely wasn't doing those kind of things. And, I can see how that's a huge game changer. I mean, that was not present in the military then. That is a disruptor. That is someone who, for whatever reason, he got it. I don't know where he got it from, because being in that space, it's so stressful. All you're doing is you're dealing with problems, you're dealing with this tactic, you're dealing with this exercise. And it's just like business, because we get lost in the whirlwind. And somehow, some way, this guy was able to break through. And I love that story.
Yeah, and Patrick, the great thing about him is he admits his failures. He'll tell you that a lot of times he fell back into the group think. I mean, I'm so thankful for the military. I'm very patriotic. I'm probably sung God Bless the USA more than Lee Greenwood has sung God Bless the USA. But, this is a gentleman who realized that the military was made up of individuals. And instead of simply following the status quo of how we treat the group, he dared to invest in the individuals. I remember one of the key questions he asked was to new enlistees who had been on the ship just a short period of time, what would you do to improve the environment on our ship? And they said, hey, show movies on the weekend up against the and he did, and pretty soon the other ships were sending their people over. He trained his cooks to go out and get culinary degrees so that they would cook food, and people were coming to his ship to eat,
to get their food too.
To get their food. Well, guess what? If they're going to change ships, guess where they're going to go? They're going to go to the ship where they know they can eat the food.
There's a waiting list to go into ship, and the same things in business, right? It's culture.
Exactly.
The companies that had a problem over the last 2-3 years, there's all this talk about quiet quitting and all these, engagement issues. The companies that had challenges were the ones that didn't have a culture.
That's correct.
And so the CEOs that have focused on doing what you're talking about, they have waiting lists. Nobody left their company.
And it's something else you noticed about him, Patrick, and you noticed that Evershelf as well. He did not go out and tout or try to recruit people. He didn't have to, because when you treat your people that way, they recruit for you. So his people would go out and say, oh, you had to eat that. Well, guess what we're eating on our ship? I mean, it's when you invest in people, you may not see the reward immediately, but there is always a reward. It may be a marriage stays together that was falling apart because you You gave time. I remember one exception he made where a soldier could go home and be there when his child was born.
Mhm.
And you just got to be willing, first of all, to question why the rule is the rule. Does it make sense? Don't be afraid to go to higher management and say, okay, listen, I know we got this guideline, but wouldn't it make sense to do this, and have those conversations? And don't be afraid to fail, because he's honest in there. A lot of the things he attempted did not work, but his people saw him trying on their behalf.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way to get them to stay.
Man, I love that. You know, Scott, there was something that kind of came up as we were kind of talking through this. It just really hit me again that you 10X'd in this last 2 years, and this will be kind of the last topic I think we'll talk about. But how have you been able to absorb that 10X growth within your company? Because that's when somebody hears about some kind of hockey stick growth like that, that's almost like, well, shit, man, they're going to get too big for their britches. How are you able to position your company to be able to handle that?
Yeah, we focused on the things that we thought benefited the industry and not just the individual. And so when we went to these groups and said, hey, listen, you've got 5,000 members, have them all join us in full. One of the biggest things we did is we touted the fact that we have this lobbying arm in Washington, D.C. So when I go to D.C., the first question I get, and I'm there about 4 times a year, is how many people do you represent? Now, they ask that question for one reason: a person is a vote. And they know that if they can do good for this industry and therefore the people in the industry, then those people are going to rally behind them when it comes voting time. Well, we have challenges and we have needs, and we're willing to be the voice of the industry. And so during COVID, that's exactly what we did. We became the voice of the industry, but we do that throughout the year. And we let them know that there's a way that you can magnify your voice and have greater impact. So Patrick, as a vocal performance measure, one of the things that I'm very mindful of is that if you hear the right voice sing, man, it will lock you in. It's just something about a Celine Dion, a Andre Bocelli, someone like that. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. But if you've ever noticed, when they're on a Grammy show or one of these award shows, they always have a choir back them up. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that? Because when multiple voices sing the same thing, it amplifies the message. So the more people we can get that we represent in the flooring industry, when we go to DC, we have amplified the message. So now it matters to everyone who listens. And so we went around letting people know, hey, we'll be your voice. You don't have to go to DC, and then we go to DC, and then another association goes to DC. We can all go represented in one voice, and they'll hear us differently than they hear us otherwise. Yeah. The other thing is we've looked for, so I have a very simple method for running an association. Again, I had never done this before. I'm certainly not brilliant in it, and I'm still learning. I will tell you this, Patrick, engagement is a lot more difficult than growing membership. Simply getting a name on a roll, well, that used to be how they measured our success, and then that was great. But man, getting people to need you, to rely on you, to become relevant to people, that's a whole different thing. And so the very simple philosophy I use is we look for the issues that are impacting the lives of people in the industry, and we own them. So the biggest issue in our industry right now is we have a lack of professional flooring installers. If you looked over the last 60 years of trade media in the flooring industry, they've talked about it for 60 years. It's either been the quality of installation or the lack of installers. Everybody talked about it. Nobody owned it. And so when I came on board, we acquired Certified Flooring Installers International, the largest certifying body of professional flooring installation in the industry. We did that because somebody needed to step up in the industry and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to talk about it anymore. We're going to own it. Right. After that, we created an organization called the Floor Covering Leadership Council, where we brought all the associations in the industry together. And we talked about our biggest challenges. Well, no surprise, this was one of them. And we put our money together, and we had the Blackstone Group do some research to prove how bad the problem was. They said we're going to be 6,000 to 10,000 installers shy a year for the next 10 years. Well, with that information, we were able to go back out and then rally the troops and say, guys, this impacts all of us. So then we, as a nonprofit, gave $1 million. Now, that's a lot for anybody, especially a lot for a nonprofit that doesn't have a revenue stream to recreate it. We gave $1 million to say to the industry, we're committed. What about you? And so we went to some of the major manufacturers, and they also committed: Shaw, Mohawk, Engineered Floors, and many others now. and created an organization called the Floor Covering Education Foundation. And their whole goal is to go out and let people know that this trade exists.
Get awareness out there.
Put their butts in seats so that we can train them and then help place them. And we scholarship. They use the money we gave to scholarship people so that finances is not a detriment to them entering this field as a trade. And so it's a level of commitment. Listen, if you went to your neighborhood and you just walked around to all your neighbors and said, what's your biggest pain point?
Right.
Then you were able to help them and say, well, listen, I don't have time to mow my grass. Well, you got 3 or 4 people that would take turns mowing that person's grass. Guess what? That neighbor will now become more faithful and more loyal to you.
Yeah.
They will see you as more than a neighbor. They'll see you as a friend. Just use the same principle in business. When you treat other people the way they want to be treated, or the way you want them to treat you, if you want to use the golden rule, but I like the platinum rule, treat other people the way they want to be treated. It creates a sense of loyalty you can't create fake. You can't make that stuff up because it requires an effort on your part. And leadership is not a static position. It's an active position. If you're not doing something, you're not leading.
Yeah. Man, these are great nuggets, man. Scott, great to have you on the show. You have such experience, such awareness around the people-centric side of things, and I love that. I'd like to take a couple of minutes and just kind of summarize some of my big takeaways before we wrap up. First is how the criticality of relationships in your industry, forming those relationships, but even then more so, surrounding yourself with people and hiring people that have that same trait. Another thing that you talked about was really balance in your life, but then also when people come to you, kind of letting your ego aside and kind of helping them figure out their own answers to the questions. Another thing I thought was great is around this concept of motivation, and you can't really motivate people. You have to create an environment where they can internally motivate themselves and the quote you said was failure is an investment. That's the first time I've heard that. I think that's a great one. The past is a great place to learn, but a terrible place to live. And the other thing, two more things. Again, you had so many great nuggets. The Warren Buffett quote, right?
Yeah.
You were born in America, you won the birth lottery, man. I love that.
It's true.
And from the book, it's your ship, a group of individuals versus a true team. It sounds like from what you were saying, like when he went there, the Navy was a group of individuals, not really cohesive, not really working together, not really having their back. And then when you take that concept and you put it into business and you treat people right, what you found is they recruit for you. You don't have to be out there doing. Fantastic, man. Well, Scott, so if there was one takeaway out of everything from today, there's so much stuff that we talked, amazing stuff, that you'd really want the audience to absorb, or up-and-coming leaders, up-and-coming CEOs, what would that be?
The power of people. I think it was Henry Cloud that wrote The Power of the Other. It's an amazing book, but your success ultimately will be determined not by the things you accomplish, but by the people whose lives you impact. And just being willing to get out of your comfort zone, invest, little things like work at a soup kitchen, do whatever you can to show people that you're not above it. Because oftentimes when people see you in the corner office or with that nameplate on your desk, they assume that you're just focused on what matters to you. If you're focused on what matters to you, you can have success short term. You never create a legacy that way. A legacy is always created by focusing on the success of others. And so The Power of the Other by Henry Cloud, a great book, and just continue to pour yourself into people and make their life better, and they'll make your life better.
Very cool. The Power of the Cloud. I don't think I've heard of that one. And that was Henry Cloud.
The power of the Other, I think it's the name.
Power of the Other. Okay. Very cool.
Henry Cloud is the guy who wrote that. And it's really
I'm always looking for new books. So Scott, awesome. So again, great to have you on the show. If any of our listeners wanted to reach out and either join the World Floor Covering Association or reach out to you for questions, how could they do that?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Facebook. Our website is very simple to remember, WFCA.org.
Got it. Okay.
World Floor Covering Association, WFCA.org. And man, I'd love to just connect and see if there's anything I can do for your listeners to make them better.
What a great offer, man. Again, thank you, Scott, for being on the show. For the listeners out there, please hit the like and subscribe and help us spread the word about what we're doing here and helping the up and coming leaders of tomorrow be that much better in their career and their business. With that, Scott, again, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.